A strict art teacher gives a failing grade to a quiet student's unusual project. 15 years later, when that same piece appears in a famous museum, the school principal discovers why tears are streaming down the teacher's face. Teacher fails student's art project. Principal finds hidden message years later. Victoria Blackwood stood in her classroom at Riverside High School, her heels clicking against the polished floor as she paced between rows of student artwork. After 15 years of teaching art, she developed a reputation as the school's strictest instructor. Her carefully styled gray hair and rimless glasses added to her intimidating presence as she evaluated the final projects of her advanced placement art class. Technical precision, she announced to the nervous students, is non-negotiable. Art without discipline is merely accident. The students watched in tense silence as she moved from piece to piece, her red pen making swift, decisive marks on her grading sheet. Victoria had sent more than one aspiring artist into tears with her critiques, but she remained convinced that her demanding standards served a purpose. The art world was cruel. Better they learn that in her classroom than in the real world. She paused at Emma Chen's workspace, where a peculiar mixed media piece sat on the easel. Unlike the other students' precise still lives and carefully composed portraits, Emma's project seemed to defy categorization. At first glance, it appeared to be a chaotic collection of torn papers, broken glass, and twisted wire arranged on a large canvas. Dark colors dominated the piece, with occasional bursts of vibrant blue breaking through the shadows. "Ms. Chun," Victoria said, her voice sharp with disapproval. "Would you care to explain what you've created here?" Emma, a quiet 17-year-old who always sat in the back row, stood slowly. Her long black hair fell forward, partially hiding her face as she approached her work. "It's called What Lies Beneath," she said softly. "It's about—" "Speak up," Victoria interrupted. "If you can't defend your work with confidence, perhaps you shouldn't present it at all." Emma's shoulders tensed, but she raised her voice slightly. "It's about the layers we build around ourselves. The glass represents how we see ourselves distorted through other people's expectations. The blue breaks through because truth always finds a way to." "Enough," Victoria cut her off again. "This is an advanced placement course, Ms. Chun. We're preparing portfolios for college applications. This," she gestured dismissively at the piece, "this lacks fundamental structure. The composition is haphazard, the execution amateur. What techniques from our curriculum did you employ here?" Emma's hands trembled slightly as she reached toward her work. "If you look closer, there are elements of perspective in the layering. The torn papers create depth through." "I see a mess," Victoria declared, making a bold mark on her grading sheet. "This is not the level of work I expect from my AP students." F. The classroom fell silent. Emma stared at her teacher, something flickering in her dark eyes that might have been anger or might have been pain. Without a word, she turned and walked back to her seat. "Remember," Victoria addressed the class, "your final portfolios are due next week. I suggest the rest of you focus on demonstrating the technical skills we've spent the year developing." As the students filed out at the bell, Emma lingered behind. She approached Victoria's desk, her unusual project cradled in her arms. "Ms. Blackwood," she said quietly, "I know this piece is different from what you wanted, but it's important to me. Could you please just look at it one more time? There's more to it than what's on the surface." Victoria didn't look up from her grading sheets. "Art isn't about hidden meanings, Ms. Chen. It's about mastery of technique. When you're ready to demonstrate that mastery, we can discuss your grade." Emma stood there for a moment longer, then placed her project carefully in the corner of the room. "Keep it then," she said, her voice barely audible. "Maybe someday someone will actually see it." Victoria glanced up sharply, but Emma was already gone, the classroom door closing softly behind her. Later that afternoon, Principal Robert Martinez stopped by Victoria's classroom for their weekly check-in. At 60, Robert had the kind of weathered face that showed every year of his experience in education, but his eyes remained kind and alert. "How are the AP portfolios coming along?" he asked, settling into a student chair that seemed too small for his frame. As expected, Victoria replied, straightening papers on her desk. Some students understand the importance of technical excellence. Others. She gestured toward Emma's project, still sitting in the corner. Robert walked over to examine the piece. Interesting, he murmured. Who's the artist? Emma Chun. Talented girl, but she refuses to follow basic principles. I had to fail this project. Robert frowned slightly. Emma Chun. Isn't she the one who won the regional poetry contest last month? The guidance counselor mentioned she's been having a difficult year since her mother's diagnosis. Victoria paused in her organizing. I wasn't aware of any personal issues. But this is an AP art class, not therapy. We can't lower our standards for emotional expression at the expense of technical skill. Robert continued studying the piece, his head tilted thoughtfully. You know, Victoria, sometimes the strictest standards aren't necessarily the highest ones. What's that supposed to mean? Just that art, like education itself, isn't always about what's immediately visible. He straightened up with a slight grunt. But you're the art teacher. I'm sure you know best. That evening, as Victoria prepared to leave, she found herself looking at Emma's project again. Something about Robert's words nagged at her. She stepped closer, really examining the work for the first time. The torn papers, she now noticed, weren't random. They were fragments of medical documents, insurance forms, and hospital bills. The twisted wire formed what might be a figure, bent but not broken, holding up what appeared to be a world made of broken dreams and sharp edges. And the bursts of blue, were they breaking through the darkness, or were they being consumed by it? Victoria reached out to touch one of the paper fragments, and as she did, something shifted in the layers. A small piece of paper fluttered to the floor. She picked it up, realizing it was a photograph. Emma and a woman who must be her mother, both smiling at the camera, the woman's head wrapped in a colorful scarf that didn't quite hide the effects of chemotherapy. On the back of the photo, in careful handwriting, was a message. For Mom, who taught me that beauty isn't about perfection, it's about truth. Even when the truth hurts. Victoria sat heavily in her chair, the photograph trembling in her hands. Had she been so focused on technical perfection that she'd missed the real artistry? The raw, honest emotion layered into every element of Emma's piece? But before she could fully process this revelation, an announcement crackled over the school intercom. Ms. Blackwood, please report to the principal's office immediately. The urgency in the secretary's voice was unusual for this late in the day. Victoria gathered her things quickly, tucking the photograph into her pocket. Whatever Robert needed could wait until tomorrow. She needed time to think about Emma's project, about her own rigid standards, about what she might have missed in her quest for perfectionism. But as she hurried down the empty hallway, she had no idea that this was just the beginning. The true meaning of Emma's art, and the impact it would have on both their lives, was still waiting to be discovered. And it would take 15 years for the full story to emerge. A story that would change not just their lives, but the way an entire community understood the power of art to reveal the deepest truths we try to hide. The Seattle Museum of Modern Art buzzed with anticipation. A special exhibition titled Hidden Voices. The art of survival had drawn unprecedented crowds, but it was one piece in particular that had captured international attention. Art critics called it revolutionary, a masterwork of layered meaning that challenged traditional perspectives on trauma and healing. Victoria Blackwood hadn't planned to attend. At 72, she had retired from teaching 5 years ago, but her reputation as Riverside High's strictest art teacher lingered. Former students still spoke of her exacting standards, her uncompromising emphasis on technical perfection. But Robert Martinez, now retired himself, had insisted she come. There's something you need to see, he'd said over the phone, his voice carrying an odd urgency. Something you need to understand. So here she stood in a crowded gallery, her familiar rimless glasses perched on her nose as she followed Robert through the exhibition. He moved with purpose, guiding her past other installations until they reached a room that seemed to pulse with its own energy. Victoria stopped short. Before her stood a massive mixed-media piece that dominated the entire wall. At first glance, it appeared to be a chaotic collection of torn papers, broken glass, and twisted wire, but on a scale that transformed these simple materials into something monumental. Dark colors dominated, with bursts of vibrant blue breaking through the shadows. Her hand flew to her mouth. "It can't be. Look closer," Robert said quietly. Victoria stepped forward, her legs unsteady. The technique she had once dismissed as amateur now revealed itself as masterful. Each torn paper, she realized, was carefully chosen and positioned. Medical documents, insurance forms, and hospital bills created a textural language of bureaucratic indifference. The twisted wire figure she had barely noticed 15 years ago now commanded attention. A mother and daughter, intertwined, holding each other up against a world of sharp edges and broken dreams. "The artist," she whispered, already knowing the answer. "It's Emma Chun, isn't it?" Robert nodded. "She's become one of the most influential artists of her generation. This piece, What Lies Beneath, launched her career. But that's not why I brought you here." He pointed to a small plaque beside the installation. Victoria leaned in to read. "Asterisk, this piece, created during my final year of high school, was originally a failure, literally. It received an F from an art teacher who taught me the most valuable lesson of my artistic career. That true art isn't about meeting others' expectations, but about having the courage to reveal your deepest truths, even when no one else is ready to see them. Asterisk. Asterisk dedicated to my mother, Sarah Chun, 1972 to 2009. Who taught me that beauty lives in broken places, and to Ms. Victoria Blackwood, who unknowingly gave me the strength to break free of conventional constraints." Asterisk. Victoria's vision blurred with tears. "I don't understand. I failed her. I dismissed her work without truly seeing it." "That's not all," Robert said. "Watch." He reached for a tablet mounted on the wall next to the piece. With a few taps, a hidden lighting system activated, and ultraviolet light swept across the installation. Victoria gasped. In the UV light, invisible messages appeared throughout the piece, written in luminescent ink. Words of hope, pain, and defiance glowed like stars against the darkness. But it was the central message, hidden in plain sight for 15 years, that brought Victoria to her knees. "Dear Ms. Blackwood, asterisk by the time you read this, if you ever do, I hope you'll understand. My mother has 6 months to live. Every day I watch her fight, not just cancer, but a system that reduces her to papers, numbers, and failed treatments. You taught us that art without discipline is merely accident. But Mom taught me that sometimes the accidents are where the truth lives. Asterisk. Asterisk, this piece isn't just art. It's every moment I couldn't cry. Every night I stayed strong for her. Every time I had to choose between buying art supplies and helping with her medication. The blue breaking through? That's hope. Not the kind that wins battles, but the kind that helps us face them with dignity. Asterisk. Asterisk, you'll fail this project because it doesn't meet your standards. That's okay. It wasn't created for your standards. It was created for every person who's ever felt broken by a system that demands perfection while ignoring the beautiful mess of being human. Asterisk. Thank you for teaching me that sometimes rejection is just redirection. Emma Chun. Victoria couldn't speak. Robert placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. There's more, he said softly. Turn around. Victoria turned to find a woman in her early 30s standing in the doorway. Emma Chun had grown from the quiet teenager into a commanding presence, her long black hair now styled in a confident bob, her eyes holding both wisdom and warmth. Hello, Ms. Blackwood, Emma said, stepping forward. I've been waiting 15 years to continue our conversation about what lies beneath. Victoria struggled to find words. I was wrong. So terribly wrong. No, Emma smiled. You were exactly what I needed you to be. She gestured to the installation. This piece has traveled to museums around the world. It's been studied, analyzed, celebrated. But do you know what people respond to most? Not the technique, not the hidden messages, but the honesty. the permission it gives them to acknowledge their own broken pieces. "But I failed you," Victoria whispered. "You failed my project," Emma corrected. "But you gave me something more valuable than approval. You gave me the push I needed to trust my own vision. Every time someone told me my work was too raw, too personal, too unconventional, I remembered your F and thought, good. That means I'm still telling the truth." Victoria looked at the installation again, really seeing it now. Not just the art, but the journey it represented. "Your mother died 3 months after graduation," Emma said quietly. "But she saw this piece first. She understood what you couldn't see then, that sometimes art needs to break rules to heal hearts." As they talked, museum visitors continued to enter the room, their conversations falling silent as they encountered the powerful installation. Victoria watched their faces, seeing in them the same emotions she had missed in Emma's work 15 years ago: recognition, connection, catharsis. "I've brought someone else to meet you," Emma said, gesturing to a young girl who had been hiding behind her. "This is my daughter, Sarah, named after my mother. She's in 7th grade, and she's failing art class because her teacher says she needs to color inside the lines." The girl smiled shyly, holding up a sketchbook filled with wild, imaginative drawings that defied conventional boundaries. Victoria felt something shift inside her, decades of rigid beliefs crumbling like the broken glass in Emma's artwork. She knelt down to Sarah's level, her knees protesting but her heart opening. "Tell me about your art," she said softly. "Tell me what lies beneath." The story might have ended there, a perfect circle of redemption and understanding. But Emma had one more surprise. "I'm opening an art therapy center," she announced. "A place where people can use art to express their struggles, their hopes, their truths. We'll work with hospitals, schools, trauma centers. And we need teachers, ones who understand both technical skill and emotional truth." She held Victoria's gaze. "Would you consider joining us? Not despite your past approach, but because of it. Because you understand now what happens when we make room for both discipline and heart." Victoria looked at the installation again, at the darkness and the light, the broken pieces and the hope breaking through. She thought of all the students she had taught over the years, wondering how many other truths she had missed in her quest for perfection. "Yes," she said finally. "I think it's time for me to learn a new way of teaching." The impact of that decision rippled out far beyond that moment. The Art Therapy Center, named Beneath the Surface, became a sanctuary for those grappling with illness, loss, and trauma. Victoria, once known for her rigid standards, became beloved for her unique ability to help students balance technical skill with emotional authenticity. Emma's installation continued to travel the world, but its most powerful incarnation remained in Seattle, where it stood as a testament to the transformative power of art and truth. Schools began incorporating its lessons into their curricula, teaching students that creativity isn't about perfection but about courage. And in a small studio at the center, Victoria kept a framed F grade, not as a reminder of her mistake, but as proof that sometimes our greatest failures can lead to the most profound successes. Years later, when asked about the teacher who failed her famous piece, Emma would smile and say, "She didn't fail my art. She failed to see it. And in failing to see it, she taught me the most important lesson: that true art, like truth itself, doesn't need immediate validation to change the world. It just needs time to be discovered." Victoria, sitting in her office at the center, surrounded by artwork that broke every rule she once held sacred, finally understood. She had spent her career teaching students how to make art, but Emma had taught her why we make it: to speak the unspeakable, to share the unbearable, to find beauty in brokenness. And every time she saw a student struggling to express their truth, she would remember the hidden message that had waited 15 years to be discovered, and she would say, "Show me what lies beneath." Because sometimes, she had learned, the greatest masterpieces are the ones that break our hearts open to let the light shine through.